Welcome back, friends, to the Swords of Africa. In our ongoing series about swords, we've looked into countries such as Gabon, the Republic of Congo, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. And although there are still more swords to unveil in the DRC, on this reunifying occasion, let's take a look at another nation. Today we have come to Cameroon, home to Babanki, Kom, and Banjun, each one a royal grassland kingdom. But for now, our gaze is on Bamum, because I hope you will enjoy a drawing by Ibrahim Njoya. That's right, our first sword is seen in a historical drawing made by King Enjoya, depicting himself and other Bamum royals. Enjoya was a very interesting and eccentric ruler who, like many other kings of the Cameroon grasslands, was an artist. But Enjoya stands out among the other artist kings for a number of reasons, including his creation of the Bamum script seen below him in this drawing. Instead of using the alphabet of European colonizers, he decided to create a script that would reflect his African culture. And although this artwork is described in great detail in the book The Royal Arts of Africa, The Majesty of Form, it does not identify what type of sword Enjoya poses with here. So although I can't be 100% sure what kind of sword this is, I do think it bears a lot of resemblance to a takoba, which is a type of sword found in multiple African countries. And although it's used by multiple African groups, the people that are most associated with the takoba are the Tuareg, who live in parts of both North Africa and West Africa. Therefore, we will probably go in more depth about the takoba in a future video. But I want to highlight it here because I think it's noteworthy that the takoba would have been found as far south as Cameroon. And also, this is a particularly fine example of an African sword form being preserved in a historical drawing. That said, this was not Enjoya's only sword. This more unusual looking blade is known in the Cameroon Grassland Kingdoms as a prestige sword. I have also occasionally seen them labeled online as Ni. Unlike the takoba, these prestige swords have a far more native Cameroon style to them. I'd also like to call your attention to the pommel, which is in the shape of a fist. It reminds me of the Black Power salute, and I'm sure some viewers also made that connection when seeing this. However, Enjoya was not alive during the Civil Rights era, so this fist likely has a more local Bamum meaning to it. And though I do know some of the symbolism of Bamum, such as frogs representing fertility and spiders symbolizing wisdom, I'm not sure what this fist icon meant to the Bamum people. Maybe I'll find out one day. But in the meantime, let's look at some more of these fancy short swords. Here we have a Bali prestige sword, which has a very cool blade shape to it. And here's a Bemliki example that has a cool face carving on the pommel. As you can see, these blades have a lot of variety in their appearance. This one that I found here was labeled as either being from the Bamum culture or the Tikar culture. This short sword not only has a cool snake theme for its grip, but even its tip continues that snake theme because it looks like a snake tongue. Another sword that may fit into this category of prestige swords is one known as the Tibati sword. In a news article from the Berlin University of Technology, there is a discussion of artifacts that were taken during the colonial era by Germany, which the current government of Cameroon wants returned to them. Among the many artworks that were looted from Cameroon, the two that seemed to be of utmost concern in this article were the Mother Goddess Ngoso and the Tibati sword. According to some other news articles I could find, it has already been decided that the Mother Goddess Ngoso will be returned. However, I could not find any info saying the same for the Tibati sword. In fact, there's very little info about it online in general. So it took me a long time, but I think I found a picture of it. Unfortunately, this is the only photo. So sadly, we do not have an unsheathed image of the blade. The reason I believe that this is indeed the Tibati sword is because this was the only sword that showed up when searching the collection of the German Übersee Museum, which of course was the museum mentioned in the aforementioned news article. Now that article did actually have a photo of a sword in it, but that's Enjoya's sword from Bamum, and Bamum and Tibati are two distinct places in Cameroon. So no, Enjoya's sword is not also the Tibati sword. The article is simply showing Enjoya's sword as well as other objects from Cameroon as examples of artifacts that Cameroon lost to Germany during colonization, implying of course that these are also among the various artifacts that Cameroon wants to have restored home. I also noticed that in my search of the Übersee Museum, it actually said that the Tibati sword's current location is actually in the Ethnologisches Museum Stalische Museum Zoo Berlin. So I searched that museum's online collection too, and sure enough, this same exact sword is the only sword that appears when searching for Tibati. So, will this sword ever be returned to Africa? Let's hope so. Now for our final short sword, we have something I saw in the very back of a book called Cameroon by Marceline K. Whitmer. Its blade is very different from the others we discussed because it has an asymmetric style. It's part of this Bamam sculpture you see here, which the book says is a yoke-type object that fits over a bottle. So I think what they're saying is that it's like a fancy wine cork because you can see a cork-shaped protrusion at the base. But it's likely much more than just that, since the book also states it was probably used in divination. No info is given about the weapons in this sculpture, but since they very likely reflect real blades, I wanted to include them in the video. Next up are some longer swords of Cameroon. We'll start with this one here, which again is from the Bamam culture, which is in a book called The Art of Cameroon by Tamra Northern. The book labels this as a prestige sword, but it's longer than the ones that we've been looking at, and the sheaths for these types, though also decorated with glass beads, are not square-shaped like the previous ones. So I feel like they deserve a separate category. The description goes on to call it a title holder's sword. What's a title holder? Well, let's look at how anthropologist Jude Fukwang defines title holder. Yes, that's a real person's name, and it's awesome. According to Dr. Fukwang, title holders may be referred to as counselors or knights. They can play an advisory role to the king, and these titles can either be inherited or achieved through meritorious services rendered to the kingdom. By the way, what ethnic group do you think Dr. Fok Wang is part of? My guess is Widecum. And yes, that is a real ethnic group name, and it's glorious. You wish you could tell a lady that you're from the Widecum people. That said, after many years of being a silly American and pronouncing that name as Widecum, I must admit I finally tried to look up how to properly pronounce that ethnic group's name, and I'm pretty sure it's actually said as Widicum. Now let's get back to the weapons. One more thing that I'd like to note about this sword is that it has a spider motif on the hilt, which, as stated earlier in the video, is a symbol for wisdom. Here's another example of one of these swords, but this time in color. It's in the Father John Emmett's SCJ Museum, which is part of the Leo Dihon Library. And in fact, there's actually two swords in this display window. Both of them are from the Bamam Kingdom, but this second one is very unusual because it looks very, very similar to a sword I've been planning to show off in a future video on the Congo. So yeah, don't be surprised if you get a deja vu moment whenever that video comes out. But yeah, it's always cool to see these trade connections across vast distances in Africa. The next large sword is a really crazy looking one from the Detroit Institute of Arts, and according to them, it's made by the Bamlaki people, and it's a currency sword. For those of you who don't know, a currency blade is a type of fancy item that was used for very important transactions. Finally, for the last swords of this video, we're going to travel to northern Cameroon in the Mandara Mountains. But before we talk about those last weapons of the video, please consider clicking the subscribe button and supporting my work on Patreon. These videos take a lot of time and effort, so your support would be much appreciated. Alrighty, here in the Mandara Mountains, there lives a large number of ethnic groups, including the Matakam people. Now, most of the blades I've seen from this area are more often like smaller knives or even sickles, like these cool looking blades that these Matakam women are dancing with. That said, I do think we can find a sword in this culture, but since we're already looking at these women and their sickles, I'd like to tell you about them. This ceremony is a fertility dance done after harvest time. It honors the earth, the ancestors, and the female farmers themselves. These agricultural hooks represent renewed fertility and abundant crops, which is in full reinforced by the sound of the seeds shaking around in the baskets attached to the women's legs. So as I said earlier, much of the blades in the area are small like this dagger here, but I think this one, for example, may be large enough to qualify as a short sword. It seems to be harder to find info on these straight blades than the sickles, but one thing I found is that the swirling design on the pommel can also be found on Matakam currency. And another thing I can say, based on this old photo that seems to show a man using one of these to clip his nails, or something like that, I think it's safe to say these things were multi-purpose tools. So yeah, hopefully you'll agree that this can qualify as a short sword, but if not, well, the next weapon should meet your expectations. The last culture of the day is the Kepsiki people. Some of them live in nearby Nigeria and go by the group name of Higi, but the majority of Kepsiki make their home in Cameroon. This is one of their swords. Although I can't find much info about these awesome sabers, I did, however, find an interesting PDF that talks about Kepsiki blacksmiths, the men who forge these swords. According to Walter Van Beek, throughout much of Africa, the one who wields the hammer does a host of other things as well, with little or no evident logical relation to metalwork. My argument here develops from two starting points. First, the evidence of early African metalworking, a field that is rapidly developing and yields fascinating results that challenge the traditional archaeological wisdom about early iron in Africa. Second, an observation in contemporary African studies like the Kepsiki Higi culture in Cameroon and Nigeria, where the main occupation of the smith are not in the forge but elsewhere and throughout deeply embedded in local culture. A Kepsiki smith, for instance, is undertaker, healer, sorcerer, diviner, leatherworker, musician, potter, as well as blacksmith, both in iron and brass. While the specific array of specializations varies among ethnic groups, the fact that metalwork is linked to other professional activities is very widespread. So yeah, that's a whole lot of responsibilities these blacksmiths have to tend to, and I feel like that's a fascinating note to end on. Let's take one more look at our sword map before we go. It's nice to finally have another country unveiled. I hope you enjoyed today's video of the Swords of Africa. Let me hear your thoughts in the comments below. Commenting on videos is one of the best ways to get YouTube to share videos more often. Plus, I of course also really enjoy hearing everyone's feedback. Thanks for watching.